So we are streaming live now on Facebook. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for this exciting 10-day solutions webinar that we begin on the 150th birthday of Mahatma Gandhi. So Mahatma Gandhi was so instrumental in the freedom movement in India, and one of the first things he did was to convince the people of India to change their clothes from British clothes to Khadi clothes made in India. It's a simple thing that everybody could do, so it helped them join the movement. They became part of the movement. And so what we are talking about today is something very similar. So to get to where we need to go, we have to change what we eat. We have to change what we consume. So from animal-based products to plant-based products to a completely vegan world. It's a simple thing that everyone can do, and it helps all of us come together as a community. Come together as a community, come together as a world, as a vegan world, so that we can then decide how do we organize ourselves? How do we connect with each other? How do we create infrastructure around it? And so I am Sailesh Rao. I've been working on this for 12 years at Climate Healers. And I am really pleased to have Jean-François, my good friend, today here with me. And he's an expert at collective intelligence, at creating infrastructure. He's been vegan for longer than me. And I met him in India last year and we instantly hit it off. And I could see, I learned so much from him. And the purpose of this webinar series, the Solution Summit, is to introduce all these people who have influenced my work, and then to have all of you join in and ask questions, because you bring different perspectives than I can as an individual. And if you ask questions from your perspective and you listen to what Jean-François has to say, what our guests have to say over the next 9 days, you will flesh out more of the solutions than what one person can, what I was able to do with these gentlemen, with these people. So Jean-François, he has a very long bio, so I'm going to read you a really short summary of it. He's been working for 20 years in the field of collective intelligence. And it's something absolutely, it's a new field, really. You know, it's a way of formalizing what we have been doing together as a species when we come together and work in harmony with each other. So it formalizes this field of collective intelligence. He's been working on this. He has been working on crypto technologies. He's the philosopher behind Holochain. So crypto technologies that will allow us to create smart distributed organizations. And he travels the world to give lectures and talks with global leaders. He's connected with a lot of the CEOs and government officials around the world. He advises different high potential startups that can lift up all of mankind, or humankind. He calls himself an open source earthling, and he operates 100% in the gift economy and lives an experimental life. He's been vegan. He has a vegan lifestyle, and he devotes himself to liberating others from violence, and the violence that we inflict on animals especially. He's a happy father of a grown-up son. He lives in Provence, France, teaches martial arts, and practices various extreme sports. Wow. Jean-François, please welcome to this webinar. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And it's a pleasure to have you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So let us start. You know, you and I agree that we are in this evolution towards a completely vegan world. So what do you see happening as we get to this, as more and more of us become vegan and we want to see a world of non-violence around us? What do you see happening to the infrastructure of the way we organize ourselves? What kind of rules do we have? What kind of laws do we have? What kind of constitution do we have? What do you see happening?
Great question. Well, what I see happening has come from my research work in collective intelligence. Very profound insights I've learned from those studies. Basically, it says that we become the matrix. We become, the kind of matrix we live in. I had no efforts to become a consumer, to become someone eating animals in my past life. I had no efforts to become, a dominant white male, in the Western world and all those things. I didn't have any theory or political theory saying those things. However, I did behave this way because I had some infrastructures around me that I did not even know about that would make me behave this way. And so I've learned in the field of collective intelligence that if we change those infrastructures, and I'll go deeper into this, we can have, most people change their behaviors very rapidly without the need to have any, deep political theory about how society should evolve. But just because the infrastructures have changed, then we can make amazing shifts happening. For instance, in the field of currencies, if we design new currencies, not the money as we've known it, that will always concentrate in the hand of the few because of its design system. And I can give more details about that later. But if we have something called money, and that money concentrates in the hands of the few, then we have pyramidal organizations, and based also on maximizing profit. And if you want to maximize profit, then you will have to do that at the expense of nature. You will have to do that at the expense of someone somewhere, human population, ecosystems, and of course, animals. They pay the biggest toll of all on exploitation because of the concentration of money that we want. So if we design a different currency system that goes from the scarcity model to a sufficiency model, then I've seen that hundreds of times, by doing workshops and designing currency systems, I see that people change their behaviors because they don't have to hunt for the scarce money. If you have a sufficient something, you don't have to hunt for that sufficient something. If you have a sufficient currency system, then you don't have to hunt for that. And that changes your whole behavior. So we can design new infrastructures, and it can come from minorities that, provide those new infrastructures as a possibility, not as something imposed. But if we see that we have a better life there, why wouldn't you go there? Why wouldn't you do migration there? So what I envision in the next few years, I envision the rise of new nations, and including a vegan nation or some vegan nations. You don't need to have just one. But nation, not in the sense of a physical territory, but in the sense of people united by the same values and having the same infrastructures, the same governance mechanism, the same currency system as well. What does it take to make a nation? It takes four things. It takes a constitution. That means a shared written document that names the values, that lists the core values that we share. So that we know how to do it. We've done that for a few hundred years now. We need a governance mechanism. Now, what kind of governance mechanism? Do we want it centralized? And then we go back into the old top-down kind of structures, or do we want it distributed? And I believe we want it distributed, because if we want to outsmart pyramidal centralized collective intelligence, then we need to have distributed systems, because everyone becomes a feedback loop in the system. Everyone can contribute in providing solutions and working on evolving the system as a participant in the system. So governance and distributed governance. The third thing, we want a currency system. And what I mean by currency, I don't mean money, but currency means something very different than just money. And I can explain that later if you want. A currency system that embraces that has the design of the values that we want to put in the economy. Basically, a currency system that can only buy and sell or flow goods and services based on the values of veganism. That means with that kind of currencies, you cannot buy meat, you cannot support, burning down the forests and all these things that we see today in the world. That means we can make those currencies smart. And there we have to go in the cryptocurrencies, using them in a smart way. And the fourth thing that we need for a nation, we need infrastructures. Exactly what we can talk about today. Infrastructures that mean crypto technologies, to make distributed governance, to make distributed currency systems, to make distributed everything, actually to move from centralized pyramidal collective intelligence as we've known it today and so far to what we call holomidal collective intelligence. You hear the root holistic. That means a distributed form of collective intelligence. And we see the rise of that collective intelligence in the world today. So I see those things happening in the next few years very quickly. I see no reason why it would not happen, because we know that the world as we've known it today cannot continue. No way. It hits the wall. We already know it. So either we have a downgrade, and yes, we can prepare ourselves for a downgrade, but I'd rather work for an upgrade. And that upgrade can happen quite quickly, because we know the future does not come from extrapolation. It always comes from some kind of quantum leap, some leap happening totally unexpected. And we can do that together. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. That's a great answer. Thank you so much. You covered a lot in your answer. And, you've been looking at pyramidal collective intelligence, which I see most large corporations are structured that way, as pyramidal collective intelligences. And and you can see that a small group of people can actually influence the way corporations behave by just changing our consumption patterns. When I see Burger King announce the impossible Whopper, or the fast food chains are now coming on. Even McDonald's is test marketing a vegan burger, and they are not doing it because they want to promote veganism. They are doing it because they are stuck. Because this small group of people around the world are demanding vegan products. And so we are showing that we have the power to change the pyramidal collective intelligence around us just by changing what we demand from them. This is exactly what Gandhi did with the Khadi movement. And we are seeing that happen with the vegan movement. And it's about taking that to the next level, and as you said, building everything around it. So tell me something about the currencies. You're talking about the different currencies and how currencies can change behavior. So can you go into a little more detail on that? All right.
Sure, I can happily go there. And also maybe later, if you feel interested, share a little bit of words about pyramidal collective intelligence as well, which I think we need to address. Now, let's talk about currencies. First, I should introduce a very important distinction between money and currencies. Money represents one form of currency among million and million of other currencies that we can design. What do I mean by currency? I mean a set of rules, just like games. When we design games, we can make highly competitive games like the Monopoly game, and you have one winner in the end and many losers, and actually everyone loses because even the winner cannot play anymore. So we call it in the games theory, we call it a collective death game, because the whole game stops. But you can also design many other games, collaborative games, where it goes on and on and on because no one loses. So we can also design currencies in a way that they become smart and they can integrate many other forms of wealth, not just what we buy and sell. For instance, the biodiversity, you don't buy it and you don't sell it, and it does represent wealth. The quality of water, the quality of air, or human welfare, or animal welfare, or education, all these things do represent wealth, and we usually call them wealth indicators, but we can actually integrate them in the way we design currencies. So the meaning of currency has really extended itself in the past few years, giving birth to new economics and new economic theories. We call a currency anything that represents some form of wealth in a living system. And more specifically, I'll become a little bit theoretical here, a language of flow, currency, see the currents, okay? Now, to get more concrete, a currency means any kind of scripture or written language that will represent some form of wealth. So, for instance, if as a community we decide that biodiversity, how many species we have around us, represents some form of wealth, then the numbers we will write for that do represent a currency. Do we buy and sell something with that currency? No, we don't. But we do see it as a form of wealth that we want to integrate in our system. Your reputation on Amazon or eBay, for instance, they already represent currencies. You don't buy and sell things, but you can also already see that your reputation has a systemic link with your flow in conventional money. So you see in those platforms, in those conventional platforms with conventional markets, we already play without knowing it with two currencies, one reputation currency. And if you have a good reputation, which you really need to have, maybe your biggest asset goes into the reputation currency, then that influences the flow of, euros, dollars, yens, rupees, whatever you name it. You see a binding between those two currencies, a reputation currency and a flow of buy and sell currency. So in the future, we can design what we call currency constellation. That means what kind of wealth do we want to see and represent in our living system? Do we want to see biodiversity? Do we want to see, animals, thriving and happy in ecosystems? And you want to see education and all these things? I bet we do. So we want to integrate all these currencies in our design, and also one or more currencies to buy and sell things. Now, we have different ways also to design currencies to buy and sell things. We have the old way, the one we've known in the monopoly game. That means you have one centralized authority that you call a nation state or a lord or a bank. And today the banks have the monopoly on creating money. To have a centralized authority that issues a quantity of money in the human ecosystem, and they say, okay, you have those tokens and now you can play with them, just like the Monopoly game, okay? I make it a little more simpler, but basically we have those rules at play today. When you do this thing, what happens? Well, it happens exactly what we learned when we play the Monopoly game. The more money I have, the more I can invest, the more I can invest, the more I have, the more I have, the more I can invest, the more I can invest, the more I have, and so on. That means money will concentrate. We call it condensation in the hands of the few. And when it condensates in the hands of a few players, then it becomes scarce on the other part of the human ecosystem. And we experience that exactly when we play the Monopoly game. And so it becomes artificially scarce. And when it becomes artificially scarce, that means a lot for a few and more condensation in the hands of the few and less for the majority. Then that creates hierarchies of needs. And you have the exact same distribution between the concentration of money and the concentration of power. Pyramidal collective intelligence needs this kind of currencies called money to exist, because pyramidal collective intelligence works on social hierarchies and social castes. And it has done that since pyramidal collective intelligence exists. That means basically since the writing exists. Do we have to do this the same way? No, we don't. We can totally perfectly design other ways to make currencies flow. And let me give you an example, and I'll stop after that because I don't want to speak all the time. We can create something called mutual credit, for instance. Mutual credit. Mutual credit means everyone begins with an account at zero. So you have zero, I have zero, Deborah has zero, everyone has zero, okay? And now let's say I buy you, 5 hours of English class, let's say for 100 credits. So my account goes minus 100 and your account goes plus 100. What have we done? Well, we have just written something on the record. That means you have plus 5, you have plus 100 and I have minus 100. And now I'll give, let's say I will sell my bike to a neighbor of mine for 200. So I had minus 100, and I sell for 200, so I go plus 100, and you still have 100 on your account, and so on. So just, people go with pluses and minuses just by doing mutual credit. And so, do we have a central bank here? No, we don't. Do we issue currency? Yes, we do. But we issue when we consume currency based on our mutual needs. Now, of course, the first question that always comes says, yeah, but how minus can you go? Can't you go, minus 1 billion credits and, and take that advantage from everyone? And I usually ask the people back, well, what would you do? And so we can start to design rules and say, maybe we have to base it to make it based on a reputation system, so that your credit line goes on your reputation, maybe on your social behavior or ecological behavior, and so on. To make a long story short, if we had to design a currency constellation, we would go into our values. What kind of tax system do we think as fair for the community? Who do we want to support? Who can go minus what, plus what, what numbers, and so on. And we would start to design a currency system, a currency constellation with rules inside that represent our value system. And then we would have our aha moment saying, wow, actually a currency system, a currency constellation do represent our values in motion. You see, when we write a constitution, we write our values, but in a static way. But when we design a currency constellation, we put our values in motion. That means they become live, they become alive. And it has really some magic in it. I know I speak from a very theoretical perspective here, but when people start to do those workshops and just, play by writing those numbers, reputation, ecological footprint, whatever you name it, just on pieces of paper with low tech, they have those aha moments and they realize, wow, I don't have a scarce currency system anymore. I don't need to behave in a scarce way. I don't need to accumulate, things on my account, because the plus number or the minus number do not represent anything. Just like, breathing, how much air I have in my lungs does not represent my health system. How do I breathe? The quality of my breathing, what I take in, what I give out, what I take in, what I give out, those flows of pluses and minus do represent the health, my economical health in a mutual credit system. So you see my point here, to make a long story short, we have the absolute freedom to design other currency systems for buying and selling, but also for representing many other forms of wealth and integrate them in our economic system. Today, if I want to exist as a human being, if I want to exist as a citizen of the world, if I want to exist as a student, as a parent, whatever, I have only one imposed game to play. Every time I spend €1 or $1, it means I play the only unique game imposed by the few to the majority. In the next month and years, we have now the technologies in our hands so we can design different currency systems. That means we can start to create different economic ecosystems with our rules, with our values in them. And for the vegan world, that means in this, I will not have the capacity to buy or sell meat. I will not kill animals. I will not exploit, ecosystems and forests and burn down forests and all these things. And that means a lot. So I want to stop here and check with you if it makes any sense.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense. Thank you so much for that explanation. It clearly opens up our minds, because we are born into this game and we think this is the only way to play the game. And we realize that there are other games you can design. And in fact, we can design those games right now and we can start playing it among ourselves. And it'll be perfectly legal, because all you're doing is changing our behavior based on these rules, and we are free to change our behavior based on these rules. So this is mainly what we are going to be discussing at the Vegan World 2026 conference. We're going to be working out some games that we can go and implement so that we can all start playing those games and funneling resources to to vegan organizations so that they can start growing their infrastructure. So let's talk about infrastructure a little bit. It's how do we grow the movement as we play the game, and what parts of the movement do we need to grow? What kind of infrastructure do we need to grow?
Well, first, I think we want to start with what I call the myth. That means the story, the narrative, the world that we see, because infrastructure will flow from this. We can't go, first into infrastructure if we don't know exactly what we want. So what kind of world do we want? And I really think the first move as a vision, as a storytelling, as a narrative between us, between all of us, vegans in the world, would say something like, let's move from a community to a global nation first. Becoming a global nation, that means now we take the next step from a community, the kind of nice to have kind of thing, the sense of belonging, but move to the next step of a nation. And that means a constitution, that means a governance mechanism, that means currency constellation, and of course, number 4, the infrastructures behind that. Infrastructures, that means not necessarily high tech. I would say high tech and low tech. On the high tech side, we would talk about crypto technologies. And I want to say by crypto technologies, let's not reduce that to cryptocurrencies. Crypto technologies include the capacity to make distributed governance, for instance, so that we can play all the same games without the need to have a centralized authority or what we call the middleman. That means a few people in charge of controlling that everyone plays the game right. We don't need to operate through what we call a server and client kind of thing, because if we put all the rules on one server, the agreements we have, who decides what, how the money flows or the currencies flows and all these things on the one server kind of thing, that makes it a single point of failure. That makes it vulnerable to attacks, and that includes governmental attacks. That's I would say the most likely ones to happen, because governments will not like those kinds of things. So if we use crypto technologies, that means we can create apps, distributed apps. Everyone has an application on his or her smartphone or computer or laptop with which we can play the rules. That means, make transactions in some cryptocurrencies or contribute to decisions, but nothing happens on one single server. So crypto technologies allow those things to happen. And that represents a very recent breakthrough, technological breakthrough, because it happens now. We have them now available today. That means in the next couple of years, 2 to 3 years, that will become a very mainstream thing and a huge breakthrough for our species to have the capacity to make distributed systems completely operational and easy to make, and not the need to have centralized governments. We know that representative democracy has shown its limits today. Even if you elect people to represent you, that means you always have a minority of people making those decisions for you, and even well-intentioned and with skills and not corrupted, they still have a limited broadband. They can still make mistakes. They have a limited view on the complexity of the system. So now we need organizations and that kind of collective intelligence called holomidal collective intelligence, completely distributed to operate. That means some infrastructure. Also, in the pyramidal collective intelligence world, social pyramids work because people operate in chains of command. And chains of command can work because you have predictable people. That means people who will do exactly what you expect from them at a given day, at a given time, for a given task. It takes a lot of training for people to become predictable. It takes a lot of conditioning at school for people to kind of forget, their essence, their true self, in order to become a function in some big human chain. Now, from a sociological perspective, we do see the evolution of human species with lots and lots of people becoming themselves more and more. And that makes them not so compatible with chains of command. So that creates a rise of social complexity. That means, highly connected, people connected to themselves, to their true self, to what they really want, to the kind of world they envision, and still hooked into the pyramidal matrix. So how do you escape from that? You escape by designing those next infrastructures. And I said earlier, with the crypto technologies leading to distributed applications on the high-tech side. We also have the low-tech side. And the low-tech goes into, hey, let's stop, eating animal products. Let's stop exploiting them. It doesn't need any kind of technology. I can do it right now. And so many other things. How can we evolve our language? How can we evolve our social codes? How can we evolve the way we relate with our bodies, and so on and so on? That also plays an important role on the low-tech side, which we should not underestimate as well.
Yeah, the low-tech side is very important as well. It's where people feel like, like I go, anywhere I go and I meet a vegan, I feel like I'm part of that family already. I already feel that infrastructure is already in place for vegans to connect with each other and to feel at home. The one thing I would say, I would call it vegan world as opposed to a vegan nation, because nation tends to have boundaries and us versus them type of dichotomy, whereas the world, even though you're talking about the same thing, it is much more inviting. It says, you are part of this. If you want to choose to play by our rules, you're welcome to come in right now. There is no limitations, no exams to write before you come in and join. So this is the idea behind Vegan World, the Vegan World 2026, that within the next 7 years, we can get to that point where everyone feels like, oh, I want to be there. I don't want to be doing what I'm doing now. I want to be there. And all the so-called pyramidal intelligences that we have today eventually dissolve into this new infrastructure that we are creating. Thanks to you. Thanks to all the amazing work that you're doing. So now, Deborah, can we get questions from the audience?
Yes, let me invite people. If you have questions, go ahead and put them into, there's a Q&A box for the Zoom, and on the Facebook group, you can type it into the comments. If you're watching by Facebook, type in any questions that you have, and I'll be monitoring those. And looks like there's one. Do you see that one that just came in?
Yeah, so Miles is asking. Should I read that?
Sure, go ahead.
So Miles is asking that Piers Robinson, professor of journalism at the University of Sheffield, identifies the propaganda machine is really what is ruling the world. I think it's important to regularly refer to it rather than use the word government. Need to be precise with language. Even using climate crisis is a deflection from the cause of the crisis, i.e. expansionary consumption crisis or other ideas. What do you say to that, JF?
Well, it speaks a lot to the work that we do in the field of collective intelligence and exploring exactly this. Why do we have those worldviews? And that goes in the very fabric of our language, not just propaganda machine and how we name things in the world. Like when I say we have a crisis, I can even invent that because I name it as a crisis, and then it becomes a crisis because I named it as this, and then I can completely obliterate the causes or the systemic causes because I focus on the end. I focus on the symptoms, a crisis, rather than what causes those things. And by the way, it takes a lot of efforts to understand the systemic causes of whatever crisis we have or the world today. I see most people, and especially people putting lots of money trying to address the symptoms. Let's build a school, or let's have, let's make clean water there in the world. Let's eradicate this disease. And of course, we need to do those things. I don't argue with that at all. But how many people put their money in understanding and treating the systemic causes? Why don't we have schools? Why don't we have clean water there? Why don't we have, a healthy lifestyle here and there? I don't see many people in the conventional world having money, putting that money on those things. Now, back into the propaganda machine, I do work a lot on those words, and I can give you an example. I've chosen to change my way of speaking years ago. In this very moment, I don't speak what we call plain English. Of course, I have my French accent and make mistakes as a French speaker, but I do speak a different English called E prime. E for English and prime as a derivative of English. That means I don't use the verb to be. If you listen again to to our conversation, I haven't used, unless I made a mistake, but I don't think so. I haven't used the verb to be. Exactly for this reason, because when I say things are, then I can impose to you and to everyone something that has nothing to do with my subjective self as an observer. If I say, the Americans are this, the men are that, Robert is shy, my friend is this or not that, or was this or not that, that I impose something to you as a view. And so it does generate social violence every day, because wars begin with the things, when you hear leaders in the pyramidal collective, in the intelligence world, when they argue, they always argue about things that are and things that are not, things that are good and things that are not good, things that are true and that are not true, and so on and so on. And so removing the verb to be has really helped me to move to a next level of consciousness, and by my own expression, because I don't impose things that are to you and to the people around me, but it also helps me to not describe the world as if I did not exist as an observer seeing it. Rather than saying, Robert is shy, if I say, I met Robert yesterday and I found him shy, then I express something from my perspective with my, opinion, feelings, thoughts, observations, and all these things. I speak from the I perspective, seeing or experiencing something, and I can offer it to you. And you may have a different experience, and we don't need to argue about those experiences. We just have different experiences, and we can build something called a-perspectivism. That means you don't have one perspective, imposing itself to the other perspectives. We call it a-perspectivism. So I completely agree with this comment about propaganda. It goes very deep in our language structures. And we can totally evolve those things in our journey. Removing the verb to be has not resolved everything. Of course, language, French, English, Chinese, whatever, they will always have some limitations, but we can hack ourselves. I like to give some conferences called Go Hack Yourself, because we can hack our language. And then by changing some words or some ontological structures, grammatical structures, suddenly we can open to a much broader field of consciousness in the way that we describe reality. And I think it can help veganism a lot as well. And that plays in the low-tech side as well.
Right. That's, it's great to see this perspective from you. It resonates very much with me, because I've always looked at things as stories being told. You're telling stories about reality, and there are many ways to tell the story. I like to use the example of Michelangelo. After carving David, if he says, "Oh man, what a mess I made on the floor," and he's trying to clean up the mess with a hammer and a chisel, you're not going to get anywhere. So you have to change our tools. We have to recognize the beauty of what we have created. Because again, that was a story we said. We were destroying things. We were actually creating something as well. So there's another question from Maitreyi. Are there ways to introduce these complex concepts at an elementary level where we are shaping the minds of the future? Perhaps there are educators who are deeply understanding this, or gamers who are designing computer games for children to wrap their mind around these kinds of currency concepts.
Yes, well, it always seems complex, complicated when I talk about currencies, because yeah, it has lots of abstraction in it. But yeah, when we play games, I do lots of workshops around the world with groups of people. So what do we do there? We first create a marketplace. So on one hand you have sticky notes saying what you can. What you need, what you may want in your life, food, shelter, transportation, fun, whatever, vacation, whatever, And on the other side, you make sticky notes about what you can offer. So you just have a marketplace, with offers and demands on both sides. And you put a price on the currency that we create that we want to play with. And of course, not euros, not dollars, not conventional legal tenders. So we imagine a currency that we will use, and we'll play with mutual credit. And so people just start to buy and sell things using mutual credit, but also not just that. They also write, how many miles did they have to go to, I don't know, buy something from someone. They also provide a feedback and a reputation with one another. So that creates a feeling that they cannot reduce something that happened to only a transaction, but they call it an experience. And an experience has a transactional part in a mutual credit system, but it also has something like reputation and miles and a carbon footprint. Very simple things that we can play with just sticky notes and pens and paper. And that just makes a game, a very simple game, for people to experience that they have now something very different in their hands that we can implement at a large scale with distributed applications. And that will need just a little bit of software. And we have this software on its way now today through Holochain as one of the next protocols that we can use in the future. So to that question, yes, once we have the tools in our hands, that becomes easy. As one of the people who brought the internet in France back in the mid 90s, and you know about this also, Sailesh, because you highly contributed to making the internet something accessible to everyone as an engineer. When I talked about the internet in the early days from a theoretical perspective, I had people saying, we'll need 3 generations before we understand that. And maybe our great-grandchildren will play with those tools, but it seems so complex. We'll never see that in our lifetime. And look at what happened. It went so fast because once you have the tools in your hands, the interface is maybe not perfect. Still, with some bugs, or it's not so great user interface. But when you have something in your hand, then you get into the flesh of the experience. And that changes everything. So just a little bit of patience, and we'll see those apps, holochain application, or distributed applications coming up in the next couple of years. And we'll get in the truth of that experience, and we'll feel the potential that distributed applications mean for our human species, what we can do, and how we can outsmart pyramidal collective intelligence today.
Yeah, in fact, I'm looking forward to that. At the Vegan World Conference, we want to define the HAP for Aquarius, the new currency system I've been talking about. Anyway, another question, and I see that even in schools when I go see my granddaughter's class, children love to play these games. If you just give them a game like this and say, go play with each other, they will easily come to terms with that as the new game, as opposed to the money game that we teach them today.
Yes.
Right. So question from Miles. Youth and elders are going to lead the revolution because the middle are, for the most part, captured agents of business as usual. Do you agree? Frank Rotering, economist. goes further and says the youth and elders will be the ones to bring the militaries on the side, on side, which is crucial. Do you agree?
Well, I do agree, but from an empirical feeling, because I don't have sociological studies or papers in my hand that can prove this. So, but from an observation perspective, yes, I do agree that youth and elders, they have nothing to lose. Parents, and they need to pay for the rent and for the mortgage and all those things. They get more entangled into the current system, and so. But look at what happens what has happened in a country like France last year, and will likely continue this year with the yellow jackets. Lots and lots of the so-called middle class. That means people having the entanglement in the conventional world cannot even make a living there anymore. It becomes unbearable for them, and they see all this social injustice, and so we can also see more and more social anger at play. Of course, the people kind of protesting in the streets, they kind of speak to a father figure called the government. So they kind of make a claim, and not all of them think that they just have to build a new world rather than asking something from the old world. But I think that will evolve. Now, something maybe we could say about pyramidal collective intelligence. I always tell to people, advise them, don't spend too much time to try to convince pyramidal structures, because pyramidal collective intelligence means what? It means governments, it means administrations, it means armies, it means companies, of course, middle or big size companies, not the startups, but it means religions as well. So every organization, middle or big, so far has only worked because of pyramidal collective intelligence. We could not run or administrate a big organization, a medium or big organization, other than having pyramidal structures. That means centralized power, a few people in control of the decision making. That means labor division, because once you've made a decision, you have to break it down into different tasks that everyone can accomplish. That means a chain of command. And that means a scarce currency system that we call money. So those four things define pyramidal collective intelligence. And I see too many people trying to change the government, like to have a new president or a new CEO, or to convince the companies to not do this anymore. And we can have some results by kind of like external constraint, like if people go in the street or they stop, buying junk food and all these things, it will impose some constraint on those social animals. But those social animals cannot evolve from the inside because of their very design. We expect from them things that they cannot do. Even if you remove the bad guys at the top and replace them with good, benevolent people trying to do their best, they can improve, of course, but they will also reach a systemic limit. And you see, for instance, we could have, let's imagine that France, randomly chosen, becomes, completely like the best country in the world. You have full democracy there, and you have, people contributing to decision making everywhere. And it still remains a pyramidal structure based on the physical territory as a physical nation state. It can't stop. It can't prevent the rainforest getting burned down. Amazonia getting burned down. We need systemic distributed form of collective intelligence. And so pyramidal collective intelligence cannot embrace the level of complexity we need to embrace in the next world. So we have to go beyond trying to, play on the election systems and to convince, CEOs and pyramidal structures, because they can't do that as social animals. It becomes too complex for them. We completely have to redesign those infrastructures. So let's not waste too much time on trying to tame, those tigers. We need to do things with them. We need to speak with them. I do that a lot myself, but it does not suffice. We have to also play, by designing the next world, designing right. the structures. And maybe one last thing, because I feel aware of the time. You said something about the word nation earlier. I consciously use the word nation First, because nation doesn't mean nation state. We can, the word nation has something just to name a group of people becoming big and having their own governance or their own culture, their own sense of belonging. And so we can see them as a nation. We can talk about the Hopi nation, we can talk about different forms of nation. In collective intelligence, when we build a new collective, it works as a living system. It has membranes. Now, an easy to get in membrane or hard to get in membrane, but living systems, they exist because they have a membrane. Hopefully I have a skin and not everything can go through. Hopefully I have lungs, I have a liver, I have, eyes or a brain, and hopefully not everything, not every ingredients or molecules can go in my brain, otherwise I would die. And so when we design living systems, we have to think of those membranes very thoroughly. If we make it, for instance, too easy to go in vegan nation, maybe we can just kill the process as well. Maybe we want to think of some levels of citizenship, maybe not just on and off, not a binary kind of citizenship, maybe different steps, so that you deserve to go there. You have some levels of contributions to make in order to prove yourself as a good citizen, as a contributing citizen, as an active citizen, rather than just coming there and do whatever you want to do. So living systems have their doors and their walls as well, and it goes into the design. So I don't care whether we call it nation or anything else. I really don't care. But we have to remain very aware of membranes as something part of any kind of living systems we design. And currencies, the way we'll design currency, will play a big role into those kind of things. I hope it.
I understand. Thanks for the clarification. That
Sure.
really helped clear a lot. Thank you.
So we do have questions coming in on the Facebook group. I recognize that we are at 1 hour. Do you guys want to stay and answer these questions? I think they're more specific, or they're more general questions about the Vegan World 2026.
Okay.
Do you have time for that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. I'll start at the beginning. Natalie asked, how can we expand our outreach in local communities?
Oh, it's, it is people to people. It is sharing things. It is talking about things. We are in a system that discourages us. They don't want to see veganism spread. So as you noticed from, when we tried to spread word about the summit on Facebook, it looks like Facebook was targeting just the people who don't want to see this happen. We got like thousands, hundreds of comments, right?
Right.
And so it's clear that they don't want to see this happen. But it is about us. It's we have to tell our stories. And we have to spread the news, spread the word.
Okay. So next question from Katie. How can I as an individual contribute to the goal of Vegan World 2026? I am recently living a vegan life at age 55 after attending a Prayer for Compassion movie screening. My primary motivation was no longer participating in the violence against all animals.
That's so beautiful to hear. Thank you so much, Katie, for doing what you're doing. And in fact, we have at the Vegan World 2026 conference, we're going to be talking about the 4 types of actions that we can be doing to help this process. So that's illumination, which is about talking about it, showing movies, screening those movies, talking to your friends and family about it. That's illumination. And then we have the protection, which is helping, preventing the old from killing the new. So that's the protection work that needs to be done to create the vegan world. Third is hospice care, which is helping businesses that are dying, find new ways, or helping the process of transformation, because an old is dying and a new is being born. So there's hospice care involved in that. And finally, you can contribute towards trailblazing, which is what JF does, which is about thinking of new ideas and thinking of new ways of seeing things, and creating the new infrastructure, the new membranes that we need. So there are many ways in which we can contribute, and you have to find what resonates with you.
Thank you. And Jessica adds here, Jessica Lenine, who will be on Sunday, adds that you can join or start a climate healers group. So join us on Sunday for that discussion about how to do that. Let's see. Okay, and the rest is just continuing that conversation. There's continuing that conversation between Jessica and a few of the people in the Climate Healers Facebook group. Okay, so I believe, let's see, is there another one? There's another sharing an idea on the Zoom. The group of high school students I worked with organized a green teen conference every year, and they would make it vegan. Near zero waste event by design. That's awesome.
Right, that's what we try to do with the Vegan World 2026 conference also. We try to make it near zero waste.
Excellent. So Sailesh, do you want to let people know about the Vegan World 2026 conference that's coming up?
Yes, so this is, the summit here is a pre-event for the Vegan World 2026 conference, which is starts on the 25th of October and goes on till the 27th. It's over the weekend that we all get together and work on these new apps that we need to work on. So we're specifying these new apps so that we can start building it, and then we can start playing the new games. So that's the goal of the conference, and it's happening in Mesa, Arizona. And you can go to veganworld2026.org/conference and register for that. And it's going to be a working conference, so people are going to come together and work together to create these new specs. So, so this is, rather than coming to the conference to listen to experts, this is how we are propagating the words of the experts, so that through the summit, you can actually listen to the experts first before you come to the conference. And thank you so much, JF, for your contribution to this. It has been great spending this hour with you. I learned a lot. I'm sure people who are listening learned a lot as well. And you are helping us make this flourish. I can see Vegan World 2026 just manifesting in front of my eyes now.
Thank you so much, Sailesh, also, and everyone. Thank you, Sailesh, for what you embody and carry, and the great vision you hold. Thank you, Deborah, for organizing this and making it easy for us. And thank you, everyone who attended. I saw great questions, great comment. It inspires me. It feels so good to know that we have a worldwide community. Everywhere we go, we can meet, because meeting other vegans mean meeting people sharing the same values of compassion, of building institutionalized compassion rather than violence, making it as an embodiment, not just something to tell to the others, but just embodying the next world. And it has such a power in itself. So let's make it a global nation, and nations will happen because they have the capacity to build their infrastructures and basically their economy, and their economy because of their currencies, and that we have it in our hands. So I feel so honored to participate to this global community, and thank you everyone for that.
Thank you, and we'll work on the technical difficulties and figure out why my camera is not working, and so hopefully you'll see me all tomorrow.
Right.
I hope so, Sailesh. Okay, so tomorrow Sailesh will be on with Jane Velez-Mitchell, and you're going to be talking about the seven
core shifts, yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. The 7 core shifts that are needed in order for us to move to a vegan world. And I'm really excited about that interview tomorrow. So
yeah, Jane's an amazing individual. So she's a force of nature. I love to talk to her.
Awesome.
Okay.
So everybody join us for that tomorrow at 9 a.m. U.S. Pacific time. And I'll send out a link to the recording for this shortly. You can also catch it in the Climate Healers Facebook group. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Bye-bye.